Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to our study of In Search of the Miraculous. We've had a little hiatus, a little break since chapter 6, and for that I apologize, but I'd also like to say thanks to everyone who's commented and got in contact about the playlist and the Gurdjieff Ouspensky material, who have been finding it valuable and it helpful with learning and studying the work, the fourth way, whatever we'd like to call it. And yeah, just thanks for reaching out and inquiring and saying, I'm enjoying it. Where is it? Because thanks to you guys, that's why we're back doing chapter 7. I always wanted to finish this playlist. And like I say, it's because of you guys G'ing me up and inquiring that we're back with chapter 7. And before I go on and share the contents with you, it's quite timely that we've had a break, so everyone's had an opportunity to read the first 6 chapters, because chapter 7 is quite a long one. Like all the rest of the chapters, very powerful and information dense. And so what I would say before I read the contents and begin our study of it is that the first section about self-remembering, consciousness and awareness is very I'd say paramount to the teachings of Gurdjieff and how one must remember ourselves, recognize we're asleep and we don't remember ourselves, and then we must remember ourselves or attempt to and observe the machine, the person. Hey, King Arjun, welcome. And also what I would say is that the second half of the chapter, where we get on to octaves, the ray of creation, the notes, do, re, mi, and all of these things, I would say to you, don't be disheartened if you don't grasp it and understand it straight away, because I've been studying this book particularly and Gurdjieff's ideas for many years, and I still struggle to understand it. What we need is a high-level musician or someone qualified in musical theory to share with us the ins and outs of the octaves and the notes. So all that by way of preamble, just to say apologies for the delay. Thanks for those reaching out, enjoying the Gurdjieff Ouspensky content, and don't be disheartened if you don't grasp some of these concepts straight away. And with that being said, as always, I'll say any questions, please feel free to get them in the comments and I'll answer them as best I can, and perhaps there'll be stimulus for a video. But for now, chapter 7 of In Search of the Miraculous, and what we will cover in this chapter is as follows. Is cosmic consciousness attainable? What is consciousness? G's questions about what we notice during self-observation. Our replies, G's remarks that we had missed the most important thing. Why do we not notice that we do not remember ourselves? It observes, it thinks, it speaks. Attempts to remember oneself. G's explanations, the significance of the new problem. Science and philosophy, our experiences. Attempts to divide attention. First sensation of voluntary self-remembering, what we recollect of the past, further experiences, sleep in a waking state and awakening, what European psychology has overlooked, differences in understanding of the idea of consciousness. The study of man is parallel to the study of the world. Following upon the law of 3 comes the fundamental law of the universe, the law of 7 or the law of octaves, the absence of continuity in vibrations, octaves, the 7-tone scale, the law of intervals, necessity for additional shocks, what occurs in the absence of additional shocks. In order to do, it is necessary to be able to control additional shocks. Subordinate octaves, inner octaves, organic life in the place of an interval, planetary influences, the lateral octave, sol, do, the meaning of the notes, la, sol, fa, the meaning of the notes, do, si, the meaning of the notes, mi, re, the role of organic life in changing the Earth's surface. And so, like I was saying, that second paragraph with the musical scale, the notes, the intervals between notes, one will have to study this information over and over again. Well, I had to anyway. And unless you're musically inclined and qualified in musical theory, perhaps that's the same for you. But I'd love if you are up on your musical scales and notation and inner vibrations, then please reach out. But for now, Again, Chapter 7 of In Search of the Miraculous. On one occasion, while talking with G, I asked him whether he considered it possible to attain cosmic consciousness, not for a brief moment only, but for a longer period. I understood the expression cosmic consciousness in the sense of a higher consciousness possible for man, in the sense in which I had previously written about it in my book Tertium Organum. I do not know what you call cosmic consciousness, said G. It is a vague and indefinite term. Anyone can call anything he likes by it. In most cases, what is called cosmic consciousness is simply fantasy, associative daydreaming connected with intensified work of the emotional center. Sometimes it comes near to ecstasy, but most often it is merely a subjective emotional experience on the level of dreams. But even apart from all this, before we can speak of cosmic consciousness, we must define in general what consciousness is. How do you define consciousness? Consciousness is considered to be indefinable, I said, and indeed, how can it be defined if it is an inequality? With the ordinary means at our disposal, it is impossible to prove the presence of consciousness in another man. We know it only in ourselves. All this is rubbish, said G. The usual scientific sophistry. It is time you got rid of it. Only one thing is true in what you have said, that you can know consciousness only in yourself. Observe that I say you can know, for you can know it only when you have it. And when you have not got it, you can know that you have not got it, not at the very moment, but afterwards. I mean that when it comes again, you can see that it has been absent a long time, and you can find or remember the moment when it disappeared and when it reappeared. You can also define the moments when you are nearer to consciousness and further away from consciousness. But by observing in yourself the appearance and disappearance of consciousness, you will inevitably see one fact which you neither see nor acknowledge now, and that is that moments of consciousness are very short and are separated by long intervals of completely unconscious mechanical working of the machine. You will then see that you can think, feel, act, speak, work without being conscious of it. And if you learn to see in yourselves the moments of consciousness and the long periods of mechanicalness, you will as infallibly see in other people when they are conscious of what they are doing and when they are not. Your principal mistake consists in thinking that you always have consciousness, and in general either that consciousness is always present or that it is never present. In reality, consciousness is a property which is continually changing. Now it is present, now it is not present, and there are different degrees and different levels of consciousness. Both consciousness and the different degrees of consciousness must be understood in oneself by sensation, by taste. No definitions can help you in this case, and no definitions are possible so long as you do not understand what you have to define. And science and philosophy cannot define consciousness because they want to define it where it does not exist. It is necessary to distinguish consciousness from the possibility of consciousness. We have only the possibility of consciousness and rare flashes of it. Therefore, we cannot define what consciousness is. I cannot say what was said about I cannot say that what was said about consciousness became clear to me at once, but one of the subsequent talks explained to me the principle on which these arguments were based. On one occasion, at the beginning of a meeting, G put a question to which all those present had to answer in turn. The question was, what is the most important thing that we notice during self-observation? Some of those present said that during attempts at self-observation, what they had felt particularly strongly was an incessant flow of thoughts which they had found impossible to stop. Others spoke of the difficulty of distinguishing the work of one centre from the work of another. I had evidently not altogether understood the question, or I answered my own thoughts, because I said that what struck me most was the connectedness of one thing with another in the system, the wholeness of the system as if it were an organism, and the entirely new significance of the word to know, which included not only the idea of knowing this thing or that, but the connection between this thing and everything else. G was obviously dissatisfied with our replies. I had already begun to understand him in such circumstances, and I saw that he expected from us indications of something definite, that what we had either missed or failed to understand. Not one of you has noticed the most important thing that I have pointed out to you, he said. That is to say, not one of you has noticed that you do not remember yourselves. He gave particular emphasis to these words. You do not feel yourselves. You are not conscious of yourselves. With you it observes, just as it speaks, it thinks, it laughs. You do not feel. I observe, I notice, I see. Everything still is noticed, is seen. In order really to observe oneself, one must first of all remember oneself. He again emphasized these words. Try to remember yourselves when you observe yourselves, and later on tell me the results. Only those results will have any value that are accompanied by self-remembering. Otherwise, you yourselves do not exist in your observations. In which case, what are all your observations worth? These words of G's made me think a great deal. It seemed to me at once that they were the key to what he had said before about consciousness. But I decided to draw no conclusions whatever, but to try to remember myself while observing myself. The very first attempt showed me how difficult it was. Attempts at self-remembering failed to give any results, except to show me that in actual fact we never remember ourselves. What else do you want? Said G. This is a very important realization. People who know this, he emphasized these words, already know a great deal. The whole trouble is that nobody knows it. If you ask a man whether he can remember himself, he will of course answer that he can. If you tell him that he cannot remember himself, he will either be angry with you or he will think you an utter fool. The whole of life is based on this, the whole of human existence, the whole of human blindness. If a man really knows that he cannot remember himself, he is already near to the understanding of his being. All that G said, all that I myself thought, and especially all that my attempts at self-remembering had shown me, very soon convinced me that I was faced with an entirely new problem, which science and philosophy had not, so far, come across. But before making deductions, I will try to describe my attempts to remember myself. And this, just to digress, is very helpful for us in our own attempts at self-remembering, if we decide to do so. The first impression was that attempts to remember myself, or to be conscious of myself, to say to myself, I am walking, I am doing, and continually to feel this I, stopped thought. When I was feeling, I could neither think nor speak. Even sensations became dimmed. Also, one could only remember oneself in this way for a very short time. I previously made certain experiments in stopping thought, which are mentioned in books on yoga practices. For example, there is such a description in Edward Carpenter's book, From Adam's Peak to Elephanta, although it is a very general one. And my first attempts to self-remember reminded me exactly of these, my first experiments. Actually, it was almost the same thing, with the one difference that in stopping thoughts, attention is wholly directed towards the effort of not admitting thoughts, while in self-remembering, attention becomes divided. One part of it is directed towards the same effort, and the other part to the feeling of self. This last realization enabled me to come to a certain, possibly a very incomplete definition of self-remembering, which nevertheless proved to be very useful in practice. I'm speaking of the division of attention, which is the characteristic feature of self-remembering. And this diagram that we're going to address and cover now is, again, very helpful in our own observations and self-remembering practice. Hello there. 161157 Gore. I hope you're enjoying the commentary and the reading and the study. I represented it to myself in the following way. When I observe something, my attention is directed towards what I observe, a line with one arrowhead, I and the observed phenomenon. When, at the same time, I try to remember myself, my attention is directed both towards the object observed and towards myself. A second arrowhead appears on the line. I and the observed phenomena, with attention in both directions. Having defined this, I saw that the problem consisted in directing attention on oneself without weakening or obliterating the attention directed on something else. Moreover, this something else could, as well, be within me as outside me. The very first attempts at such a division of attention showed me its possibility. At the same time, I saw two things clearly. In the first place, I saw that self-remembering, resulting from this method, had nothing in common with self-feeling or self-analysis. It was a new and very interesting state, with a strangely familiar flavour. And secondly, I realized that moments of self-remembering do occur in life, although rarely. Only the deliberate production of these moments created the sensation of novelty. Actually, I had been familiar with them from early childhood. They came either in new and unexpected surroundings, in a new place, among new people, while travelling, for instance, when suddenly one looks about one and says, "How strange! I am in this place." Or in very emotional moments, in moments of danger, in moments when it is necessary to keep one's head, when one hears one's own voice and sees and observes oneself from the outside. I saw quite clearly that my first recollections of life, in my own case, very early ones, were moments of self-remembering. This last realization revealed much else to me. That is, I saw that I really only remember those moments of the past in which I remembered myself. Of the others, I know only that they took place. I am not able wholly to revive them, to experience them again. But the moments when I had remembered myself were alive and were in no way different from the present. I was still afraid to come to conclusions, but I already saw that I stood upon the threshold of a very great discovery. I had always been astonished at the weakness and the insufficiency of our memory. So many things disappear. For some reason or other, the chief absurdity of life for me consisted in this. Why experience so much in order to forget it all afterwards? Besides, there was something degrading in this. A man feels something which seems to him very big. He thinks he will never forget it. 1 or 2 years pass by, and nothing remains of it. It now became clear to me why this was so and why it could not be otherwise. If our memory really keeps alive only moments of self-remembering, it is clear why our memory is so poor. All these were the realizations of the first days. Later, when I began to learn and divide attention, when I began to learn to divide attention, I saw that self-remembering gave wonderful sensations which, in a natural way, that is, by themselves, come to us only very seldom and in exceptional conditions. Thus, for instance, at that time I used very much to like to wander through St. Petersburg at night and to sense the houses and the streets. St. Petersburg is full of these strange sensations. Houses, especially old houses, were quite alive. I all but spoke to them. There was no imagination in it. I did not think of anything. I simply walked along while trying to remember myself and looked about. The sensations came by themselves. Later on, I was to discover many unexpected things in the same way, but I will speak of this further on. Sometimes self-remembering was not successful. At other times, it was accompanied by curious observations. I think that's all right, yep. I was once walking along the Litany towards the Nevsky, and in spite of all my efforts, I was unable to keep my attention on self-remembering. The noise, movement, everything distracted me. Every minute I lost a thread of attention, found it again, and then lost it again. At last I felt a kind of ridiculous irritation with myself, and I turned into the street on the left, having firmly decided to keep my attention on the fact that I would remember myself, at least for some time, at any rate until I reached the following street. I reached the Nadezhinskaya without losing the thread of attention, except perhaps for short moments. Then I again turned towards the Nevsky, realizing that in quiet streets it was easier for me not to lose the line of thought, and wishing therefore to test myself in more noisy streets, I reached the Nevsky, still remembering myself, and was already beginning to experience the strange emotional state of inner peace and confidence which comes after great efforts of this kind. Just round the corner on the Nevsky was a tobacconist's shop, where they made my cigarettes. Still remembering myself, I thought I would call there and order some cigarettes. 2 hours later I woke up in the Tavritchenskaya, Tavricheskaya. 2 hours later, I woke up in the Tavricheskaya, that is, far away. I was going by Izvotchik to the printers. The sensation of awakening was extraordinarily vivid. I can almost say that I came to. I remembered everything at once, how I had been walking along the Nadejinskaya, how I had been remembering myself, how I had thought about cigarettes, and how at this thought I seemed all at once to fall and disappear into a deep sleep. At the same time, while immersed in this sleep, I had continued to perform consistent and expedient actions. I left the tobacconist, called at my hat in the litany, telephoned to the printers. I wrote 2 letters. Then again I went out of the house. I walked on the left side of the Nevsky up to the Gostinnoy Dvor, intending to go to the Ofitserskaya. Then I had changed my mind, as it was getting late. I had taken an Izvotchik and was driving towards the Kavalgarskaya to my printers. And on the way, while driving along the Tavricheskaya, I began to feel a strange uneasiness, as though I had forgotten something, and suddenly I remembered that I had forgotten to remember myself. I spoke of my observations and deductions to the people in our group, as well as to my various literary friends and others. I told them that this was the centre of gravity of the whole system, and of all work on oneself, that now work on oneself was not only empty words, but a real fact, full of significance, thanks to which psychology became an exact, and at the same time a practical science. I said that European and Western psychology in general had overlooked a fact of tremendous importance, namely, that we do not remember ourselves, that we live and act and reason in deep sleep, not metaphorically, but in absolute reality, and also that, at the same time, we can remember ourselves if we make sufficient efforts, that we can awaken. I was struck by the difference between the understanding of the people who belong to our groups and that of other people outside them. The people who belonged to our groups understood, though not all at once, that we had come into contact with a miracle, and that it was something new, something that had never existed anywhere before. The other people did not understand this. They took it all too lightly, and sometimes they even began to prove to me that such theories had existed before. A.L. Volinsky, whom I had often met and with whom I had talked a great deal since 1909, and whose opinions I valued very much, did not find in the idea of self-remembering anything that he had not known before. "This is an apperception," he said to me. "Have you read Wundt's Logic? You will find there his latest definition of apperception. It is exactly the same thing you speak of. Simple observation is perception. Observation with self-remembering, as you call it, is apperception. Of course Wundt knew of it." I did not want to argue with Volinsky. I had read Wundt, and, of course, what Wundt had written was not at all what I had said to Volinsky. Wundt had come close to this idea, but others had come just as close and had afterwards gone off in a different direction. He had not seen the magnitude of the idea which was hidden behind his thoughts about different forms of perception. And, not having seen the magnitude of the idea, he, of course, could not see the central position which the idea of the absence of consciousness and the idea of the possibility of the voluntary creation of the consciousness ought to occupy in our thinking. Only it seems strange to me that Volinsky could not see this even when I pointed it out to him. I subsequently became convinced that this idea was hidden by an impenetrable veil for many otherwise very intelligent people, and still later on I saw why this was so. The next time G came from Moscow, he found us immersed in experiments in self-remembering and in discussions about these experiments. But at his first lecture, he spoke of something else. In right knowledge, the study of man must proceed on parallel lines with the study of the world, and the study of the world must run parallel with the study of man. And again, this is very important, for me anyway. I feel it's very important in the Gurdjieff system. So I'll say that again. In right knowledge, the study of man must proceed on parallel lines with the study of the world, and the study of the world must run parallel with the study of man. Laws are everywhere the same, in the world as well as in man. Having mastered the principles of any one law, we must look for its manifestation in the world and in man simultaneously. Moreover, some laws are more easily observed in the world, others are more easily observed in man. Therefore, in certain cases, it is better to begin with the world and then to pass on to man, and in other cases it is better to begin with man and then to pass on to the world. This parallel study of the world and of man shows the student the fundamental unity of everything and helps him to find analogies in phenomena of different orders. The number of fundamental laws which govern all processes, both in the world and in man, is very small. Different numerical combinations of a few elementary forces create all the seeming variety of phenomena. In order to understand the mechanics of the universe, it is necessary to resolve complex phenomena into these elementary forces. The first fundamental law of the universe is the law of three forces, or three principles, or, as it is often called, the law of three. According to this law, every action, every phenomena, in all worlds without exception, is the result of a simultaneous action of three forces, the positive, the negative, and the neutralizing. Of this we have already spoken, and in future we will return to this law with every new line of study. The next fundamental law of the universe is the law of seven, or the law of octaves. In order to understand the meaning of this law, it is necessary to regard the universe as consisting of vibrations. These vibrations proceed in all kinds, aspects, and densities of the matter which constitutes the universe, from the finest to the coarsest. They issue from various sources and proceed in various directions, crossing one another, colliding, strengthening, weakening, arresting one another, and so on. In this connection, according to the usual views accepted in the West, vibrations are continuous. This means that vibrations are usually regarded as proceeding uninterruptedly, ascending or descending so long as there continues to act the force of the original impulse which caused the vibration and which overcomes the resistance of the medium in which the vibrations proceed. When the force of the impulse becomes exhausted and the resistance of the medium gains the upper hand, the vibrations naturally die down and stop. But until this moment is reached, that is, until the beginning of the natural weakening, the vibrations develop uniformly and gradually, and, in the absence of resistance, can even be endless. So that one of the fundamental propositions of our physics is the continuity of vibrations, although this has never been precisely formulated because it has never been opposed. In certain of the newest theories, this proposition is beginning to be shaken. Nevertheless, physics is still very far from a correct view on the nature of vibrations, or what corresponds to our conception of vibrations in the real world. In this instance, the view of ancient knowledge is opposed to that of contemporary science because, at the base of the understanding of vibrations, ancient knowledge places the principle of the discontinuity of vibrations. The principle of the discontinuity of vibrations means the definite and necessary characteristics of all vibrations in nature, whether ascending or descending, to develop not uniformly, but with periodical accelerations and retardations. This principle can be formulated still more precisely if we say that the force of the original impulse in vibrations does not act uniformly, but, as it were, becomes alternately stronger and weaker. The force of the impulse acts without changing its nature, and vibrations develop in a regular way, only for a certain time which is determined by the nature of the impulse, the medium, the conditions, and so forth. But at a certain moment a kind of change takes place in it, and the vibrations, so to speak, cease to obey it, and for a short time they slow down, and to a certain extent change their nature or direction. For example, ascending vibrations at a certain moment begin to ascend more slowly, and descending vibrations begin to descend more slowly. After this temporary retardation, both in ascending and descending, the vibrations again enter the former channel and for a certain time ascend or descend uniformly, up to a certain moment when a check in their development again takes place. In this connection, it is significant that the periods of uniform action of the momentum are not equal, and that the moments of retardation of the vibrations are not symmetrical. One period is shorter, the other is longer. In order to determine these moments of retardation, or rather the checks in the ascent and descent of vibration, the lines of development of vibrations are divided into periods corresponding to the doubling or the halving of the number of vibrations in a given space of time. So now we are getting into the weeds, and like I say, it's complicated, but don't fret if it doesn't all make sense instantly, because yes, universal vibrations. It's just started snowing where I am, so for your information. Let us imagine a line of increasing vibrations. Let us take them at the moment when they are vibrating at the rate of 1,000 a second. After a certain time, the number of vibrations is doubled, that is, reaches 2,000, as you can see. It has been found and established that in this interval of vibrations between the given number of vibrations and a number twice as large, there are two places where a retardation in the increase of vibration takes place. One is near the beginning, but not at the beginning itself. The other occurs almost at the end, approximately, as you can see, the two dashes in between. The laws which govern the retardation or the deflection of vibrations from their primary direction were known to ancient science. These laws were duly incorporated into a particular formula or diagram which has been preserved up to our times. In this formula, the period in which vibrations are doubled was divided into 8 unequal steps corresponding to the rate of increase in the vibrations. The 8th step repeats the first step with double the number of vibrations. This period of the doubling of the vibrations, or the line of the development of vibrations between a given number of vibrations and double that number, is called an octave, that is to say, composed of 8. The principle of dividing into 8 unequal parts the period in which the vibrations are doubled is based upon the observation of the non-uniform increase of vibrations in the entire octave. And separate steps of the octave show acceleration and retardation at different moments of its development. In the guise of this formula, ideas of the octave have been handed down from teacher to pupil, from one school to another. In very remote times, one of these schools found that it was possible to apply this formula to music. In this way was obtained the 7-tone musical scale, which was known in the most distant antiquity, then forgotten, and then discovered or found again. The 7-tone scale is the formula of a cosmic law which was worked out by ancient schools and applied to music. At the same time, however, if we study the manifestations of the law of octaves in vibrations of other kinds, we shall see that the laws are everywhere the same, and that light, heat, chemical, magnetic, and other vibrations are subject to the same laws as sound vibrations. For instance, the light scale is known to physics. In chemistry, the periodic system of the elements is without doubt closely connected with the principle of octaves, although this connection is still not fully clear to science. A study of the structure of the 7-tone musical scale gives a very good foundation for understanding the cosmic law of octaves. Let us again take the ascending octave, that is, the octave in which the frequency of vibrations increases. Let us suppose that this octave begins with 1,000 vibrations a second. Let us designate these 1,000 vibrations by the note Do. Vibrations are growing, that is, their frequency is increasing. At the point where they reach 2,000 vibrations a second, there will be a second Do, that is, the Do of the next octave. Here we see figure 9. So instead of 1,000 and 2,000, we now have Do and then the big Do of the next octave. The period between one Do and the next, that is, an octave, is divided into 7 unequal parts because the frequency of vibrations does not increase uniformly. do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. The ratio of the pitch of the notes or the frequency of vibration will be as follows. If we take do as 1, then re will be 9/8, mi 5/4, fa 4/3, sol 3/2 or 3/2, la 3/2, and si 15/8, and do 2. Any mathematicians out there, sorry if I've butchered whatever those fractions are. And there you can see it in diagrammatical form. And this next bit is very interesting. And again, forgive me any mathematicians out there. The differences in the acceleration or increase in the notes or the difference in tone will be as follows. So here, I'll just leave you. I don't know if it's helpful to read it all out. Between do and re, 9/8 - 1 equals 9/8. Between re and mi, 5/4 - 9/8 equals 10/9. And then we have an increased retarded, and then again at the end, increase again retarded. So again, this bottom section, I can honestly say, yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I understand all that. But I do believe that with time and effort and study, is clearly fractions, maths, and the musical scale, perhaps I could understand it. But I'm not going to pretend to you guys. The differences in the notes or the differences in the pitch of the notes are called intervals. We see that there are 3 kinds of intervals in the octave: 9/8, 10/9, and 16/15, which in whole numbers correspond to 405, 400, and 384. The smallest interval, 16/15, occurs between mi and fa and between si and do. These are precisely the places of retardation in the octave. In relation to the musical 7-tone scale, it is generally considered, theoretically, that there are 2 semitones between each 2 notes, with the exception of the intervals mi, fa, and si, do, which have only 1 semitone, and in which 1 semitone is regarded as being left out. In this manner, 20 notes are obtained, 8 of which are fundamental, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, and 12 intermediate, 2 between each of the following 2 notes, do and re, re and mi, fa and sol, sol and la, la and si, and one between each of the following 2 notes, mi and fa, and si and do. But in practice, that is, in music, instead of 12 intermediary semitones, only 5 are taken. That is, 1 semitone between do, re, re, mi, fa, sol, sol, la, and la, si. Between mi and fa and between si and do, the semitone is not taken at all. In this way, the structure of the musical 7-tone scale gives a scheme of the cosmic law of intervals or absent semitones. In this respect, when octaves are spoken of in a cosmic or a mechanical sense, only those intervals between mi, fa, and si, do are called intervals. So, I hope you understood all of that perfectly. These sections definitely required in-depth study, and also I would argue if you're not qualified in these things, you would need to go back and sort of learn some maths, obviously, because there's a bit of maths there with the fractions and the intervals, and also some musical theory. And again, through YouTube, the very platform that we're learning about In Search of the Miraculous on, I'm sure with a quick search, you can find information about anything that you'd like refreshing or learning in order to understand this section further. And with time and intention, I have no doubt that one would be able to understand this more deeply, then take it into their life and their self-remembering and awareness and consciousness, and improve their life and see more connections everywhere. But after that digression, let's carry on. If we grasp its full meaning, the law of octaves gives us an entirely new explanation of the that's just what I was Just what I was saying. If we grasp its full meaning, the law of octaves gives us an entirely new explanation of the whole of life, of the progress and development of phenomena on all planes of the universe observed by us. This law explains why there are no straight lines in nature, and also why we can neither think nor do, why everything with us is thought, why everything happens with us, and happens usually in a way opposed to what we want or expect. All this is the clear and direct effect of the intervals or retardations in the development of vibrations. What precisely does happen at the moment of the retardation of vibrations? A deviation from the original direction takes place. The octave begins in the direction shown by the arrow, do, re, mi. But a deviation takes place between mi and fa. The line begun to change. But a deviation takes place between mi and fa. The line begun at do changes its direction, as you can see. And through fa, sol, la, and si, it descends at an angle to its original direction shown by the first three notes. Between si and do, the second interval occurs, a fresh deviation, a further change of direction. The next octave gives an even more marked deviation. The one following that a deviation is... The next octave gives an even more marked deviation. The one following that a deviation that is more marked still, so that the line of octaves may at last turn completely round and proceed in a direction opposite to the original direction, as you can see. And this is, it'll all be explained, but yeah, this is why, Gurdjieff and Ouspensky will explain it, so let's go. In developing further, the line of octaves, or the line of development of vibrations, may return to the original direction. In other words, make a complete circle. This law shows why straight lines never occur in our activities, why, having begun to do one thing, we in fact constantly do something entirely different, often the opposite of the first thing, although we do not notice this and continue to think that we are doing the same thing that we began to do. All this and many other things can only be explained with the help of the law of octaves, together with an understanding of the role and significance of intervals which cause the line of the development of force constantly to change, to go in a broken line, to turn round, to become its own opposite, and so on. Such a course of things, that is, a change of direction, we can observe in everything. After a certain period of energetic activity or strong emotion or a right understanding, a reaction comes. Work becomes tedious and tiring. Moments of fatigue and indifference enter into feeling. Instead of right thinking, a search for compromises begins, suppression, evasion of difficult problems. But the line continues to develop, though now not in the same direction as at the beginning. Work becomes mechanical. Feeling becomes weaker and weaker, descends to the level of the common events of the day. Thought becomes dogmatic, literal. Everything proceeds in this way for a certain time, then again there is a reaction, again a stop, again a deviation. The development of the force may continue, but the work which was begun with great zeal and enthusiasm has become an obligatory and useless formality. A number of entirely foreign elements have entered into feeling, considering, vexation, irritation, hostility. Thought goes round in a circle, repeating what was known before, and the way out which had been found becomes more and more lost. The same thing happens in all spheres of human activity, in literature, science, art, philosophy, religion, in individual and above all in social and political life. We can observe how the line of the development of forces deviates from its original direction and goes, after a certain time, in a diametrically opposite direction, still preserving its former name. A study of history from this point of view shows the most astonishing facts, which mechanical humanity is far from desiring to notice. Perhaps the most interesting examples of such change of direction in the line of the development of forces can be found in the history of religion, particularly in the history of Christianity, if it is studied dispassionately. Think how many turns the line of development of forces must have taken to come from the gospel preaching of love to the Inquisition, or to go from the ascetics of the early centuries studying esoteric Christianity to the scholastics who calculated how many angels could be placed on the point of a needle. The law of octaves explains many phenomena in our lives which are incomprehensible. First is the principle of the deviation of forces. Second is the fact that nothing in the world stays in the same place or remains what it was. Everything moves, everything is going somewhere, is changing, and inevitably either develops or goes down, weakens or degenerates, that is to say, it moves along either an ascending or a descending line of octaves. And third, that in the actual development itself of both ascending and descending octaves, fluctuations, rises and falls are constantly taking place. We have spoken so far chiefly about the discontinuity of vibrations and about the deviation of forces. We must now clearly grasp two other principles: the inevitability of either ascent or descent in every line of development of forces, and also the periodic fluctuations, that is, rises and falls, in every line, whether ascending or descending. Nothing can develop by staying on one level. Ascent or descent is the inevitable cosmic condition of any action. We neither understand nor see what is going on around and within us, either because we do not allow for the inevitability of descent when there is no ascent, or because we take descent to be ascent. These are two of the fundamental causes of our self-deception. We do not see the first one because we continually think that things can remain for a long time at the same level, and we do not see the second because ascents, where we see them, are in fact impossible as it is to increase consciousness by mechanical means. Having learned to distinguish ascending and descending octaves in life, we must learn to distinguish ascent and descent within the octaves themselves. Whatever sphere of our life we take, we can see that nothing can ever remain level and constant. Everywhere and in everything proceeds the swinging of the pendulum. Everywhere and in everything the waves rise and fall. Our energy in one or another direction which suddenly increases and afterwards just as suddenly weakens, our moods which become better or become worse without any visible reason, our feelings, our desires, our intentions, our decisions, all from time to time pass through periods of ascent or descent, become stronger or weaker. And there are perhaps 100 pendulums moving here and there in man. These ascents and descents, these wave-like fluctuations of moves, thought, feelings, energy, determination, are periods of the development of forces between intervals in the octaves as well as the intervals themselves. Upon the law of octaves in its three principal manifestations depend many phenomena both of a psychic nature as well as those immediately connected with our life. Upon the law of octaves depends the imperfection and the incompleteness of our knowledge in all spheres without exception, chiefly because we always begin in one direction and afterwards, without noticing it, proceed in another. As has been said already, the law of octaves in all its manifestations was known to ancient knowledge. Even our division of time, that is, the days of the week, into work days and Sundays, is connected with the same properties and inner conditions of our activity which depend upon the general law. The biblical myth of the creation of the world in 6 days and of the 7th day, in which God rested from his labours, is also an expression of the law of octaves, or an indication of it, though an incomplete one. Observations based on an understanding of the law of octaves show that vibrations may develop in different ways. In interrupted octaves, they merely begin and fall, are drowned or swallowed up by other stronger vibrations which intersect them or which go in an opposite direction. In octaves which deviate from the original direction, the vibrations change their nature and give results opposite to those which might have been expected at the beginning. And it is only in octaves of a cosmic order, both descending and ascending, that vibrations develop in a consecutive and orderly way. following the same direction in which they started. Further observations show that a right and consistent development of octaves, although rare, can be observed in all the occasions of life and in the activity of nature, and even in human activity. Okay, I need to read a bit more here. The right development of these octaves is based on what looks an accident. It sometimes happens that octaves go in parallel to the given octave, intersecting or meeting it, in some way or another fill up its intervals and make it possible for the vibrations of the given octave to develop in freedom and without checks. Observation of such rightly developing octaves establishes the fact that if at the necessary moment, that is, at the moment when the given octave passes through an interval, there enters into it an additional shock, which corresponds in force and character, it will develop further without hindrance along the original direction, neither losing anything nor changing its nature. In such cases, there is an essential difference between ascending and descending octaves. In an ascending octave, the first interval comes between mi and fa. If corresponding additional energy enters at this point, the octave will develop without hindrance to si. But between si and do, it needs a much stronger additional shock for its right development than between mi and fa, because the vibrations of the octave at this point are of a considerably higher pitch, and to overcome a check in the development of the octave a greater intensity is needed. In a descending octave, on the other hand, the greatest interval occurs at the very beginning of the octave, immediately after the first do, and the material for filling it is very often found either in do itself or in the interval, or in the lateral vibrations evoked by do. For this reason, a descending octave develops much more easily than an ascending octave, and is passing beyond si, it reaches fa without hindrance. Here an additional shock is necessary, though considerably less strong than the first shock between do and si. In the big cosmic octave, which reaches us in the form of the ray of creation, we can see the first complete example of the law of octaves. The ray of creation begins with the Absolute. The Absolute is the all possessing full unity, full will, and full consciousness creates worlds within itself. In this way, beginning the descending world octave. The Absolute is the do of this octave. The worlds which the Absolute creates in itself are si. The interval between do and si in this case is filled by the will of the Absolute. The process of creation is developed further by the force of the original impulse and an additional shock. Si passes into La, which for us is our starry world, the Milky Way. La passes into Sol, our sun, the solar system. Sol passes into Fa, the planetary world. And here, between the planetary world as a whole and our Earth, occurs an interval. This means that the planetary radiations carrying various influences to the Earth are not able to reach it, or, so to speak, more correctly, they are not received. The Earth reflects them. In order to fill the interval at this point of the ray of creation, a special apparatus is created for receiving and transmitting the influences coming from the planets. This apparatus is organic life on Earth. Organic life transmits to the Earth all the influences intended for it, and makes possible the further development and growth of the Earth, me, the cosmic octave, and then of the moon or ray, after which follows another do, nothing. Between all and nothing passes the ray of creation. You know the prayer, Holy God, holy the firm, holy the immortal. This prayer comes from ancient knowledge. Holy God means the absolute or all. Holy the firm also means the absolute or nothing. Holy the immortal signifies that which is between them, that is, the 6 notes of the ray of creation with organic life. All 3 taken together make one. This is the coexistent and indivisible Trinity. We must now dwell on the idea of the additional shocks which make it possible for the lines of forces to reach a projected aim. As I said before, shocks may occur accidentally. Accident is, of course, a very uncertain thing, but those lines of development of forces which are straightened out by accident, and which man can sometimes see or suppose or expect, create in him more than anything else the illusion of straight lines. That is to say, he thinks that straight lines are the rule and broken and interrupted lines the exception. This, in its turn, creates in him the illusion that it is possible to do, possible to attain a projected aim. In reality, a man can do nothing. If, by accident, his activity gives a result, even though it resembles only in appearance or in name the original aim, a man assures himself and others that he has attained the aim which he set before himself, and that anyone else would also be able to attain his aim, and others believe him. In reality, this is an illusion. A man can win at roulette, but this would be accident. Attaining an aim which one has set before oneself in life or in any particular sphere of human activity is just the same kind of accident. The only difference is that in regard to roulette, a man at least knows for certain whether he has lost or won on each separate occasion, that is, on each separate stake. But in the activities of his life, particularly with activities of the kind that many people are concerned in, and when years pass between the beginning of something and its result, a man can very easily deceive himself and take the result obtained as the result desired, that is, believe that he has won, when on the whole he has lost. The greatest insult for a man-machine is to tell him that he can do nothing, can attain nothing, that he can never move towards any aim whatever, and that in striving towards one, he will inevitably create another. Actually, of course, it cannot be otherwise. The man-machine is in the power of accident. His activities may fall by accident into some sort of channel which has been created by cosmic or mechanical forces, and they may by accident move along this channel for a certain time, giving the illusion that aims of some kind are being attained. Such accidental correspondence of results which the aims have set before us, or the attainment of aims in small things which can have no consequences, creates in mechanical man the conviction that he is able to attain any aim, is able to conquer nature, as it is called, is able to arrange the whole of his life, and so on. As a matter of fact, he is of course unable to do anything of the kind, because not only has he no control over things outside himself, but he has no control even over things within himself. This last must be very clearly understood and assimilated. At the same time, it must be understood that control over things begins with control over things in ourselves, with control over ourselves. A man who cannot control himself or the course of things within himself can control nothing. In what way can control be attained? The technical part of this is explained by the law of octaves. Octaves can develop consecutively and continuously in the desired direction if additional shocks enter them at the moments necessary, that is, at the moments when vibrations slow down. If additional shocks do not enter at the necessary moments, octaves change their direction. To entertain hopes of accidental shocks coming from somewhere by themselves at the moment necessary is of course out of the question. There remains for a man the choice either of finding a direction for his activities which corresponds to the mechanical line of events of a given moment, in other words, of going where the wind blows, or swimming with the stream, even if this contradicts his inner inclinations, convictions, and sympathies, or of reconciling himself to the failure of everything he starts out to do. Or he can learn to recognize the moments of the intervals in all lines of his activity and to learn to create the additional shocks. In other words, learn to apply to his own activities the method which cosmic forces make use of in creating additional shocks at the moment necessary. The possibility of artificial, that is, specially created additional shocks gives a practical meaning to the study of the law of octaves and makes this study obligatory and necessary if a man desires to step out of the role of passive spectator or that which is happening to him and around him. The man-machine can do nothing. To him and around him everything happens. In order to do, it is necessary to know the law of octaves, to know the moments of the intervals, and be able to create necessary additional shocks. It is only possible to learn this in a school, that is to say, in a rightly organized school which follows all esoteric traditions. Without the help of a school, a man by himself can never understand the law of octaves, the points of the intervals, and the order of creating shocks. He cannot understand because certain conditions are necessary for this purpose, and these conditions can only be created in a school which is itself created upon these principles. How a school is created on the principles of the law of octaves will be explained in due course, and this in its turn will explain to you one aspect of the union of the law of 7 with the law of 3. In the meantime, it can be said only that in school teaching In the meantime, it can be said only that in school teaching a man is given examples of both descending, creative, and ascending or evolutionary cosmic octaves. Western thought, knowing neither about octaves nor about the law of 3, confuses the ascending and the descending lines and does not understand that the line of evolution is opposed to the lines of creation, that is to say, it goes against it, as though against the stream. In the study of the law of octaves, it must be remembered that octaves in their relation to each other are divided into fundamental and subordinate. The fundamental octave can be likened to the trunk of a tree, giving off branches of lateral octaves. The 7 fundamental notes of the octave and the 2 intervals, the bearers of new directions, give altogether 9 links of a chain, 3 groups of 3 links each. The fundamental octaves are connected with the secondary or subordinate octaves in a certain definite way. Out of the subordinate octaves of the first order come the subordinate octaves of the second order, and so on. The construction of octaves can be compared with the construction of a tree. From the straight basic trunk there come out boughs on all sides which divide in their turn and pass into branches, becoming smaller and smaller, and finally are covered with leaves. The same process goes on in the construction of the leaves, in the formation of the veins, the serrations, and so on. Like everything in nature, the human body, which represents a certain whole, bears within and without the same correlations. According to the number of the notes of the octave and its intervals, the human body has 9 basic measurements, expressed by the numbers of a definite measure. In individuals, these numbers, of course, differ widely, but within certain definite limits. These 9 basic measurements, giving a full octave of the first order by combining in a certain definite way, pass into measurements of subordinate octaves, which gives rise in their turn of other subordinate octaves, and so on. In this way it is possible to obtain the measurement of any member or any part of the human body, as they are all in a definite relationship to one another. The law of octaves naturally gave rise to a great many talks in our group and to much perplexity. G warned us all the time against too much theorizing. You must understand and feel this law in yourselves, he said. Only then will you see it outside yourselves. This, of course, is true, but the difficulty was not only in this. Merely a technical understanding of the law of octaves requires a lot of time, and we return to it continually, sometimes making unexpected discoveries, sometimes again losing what had seemed to us already established. It is now difficult to convey how at different periods now one and now another idea became the centre of gravity in our work, attracted the greatest attention, gave rise to most talks. The idea of the law of octaves became in its way a permanent centre of gravity. We returned to it on every occasion. We spoke of it and discussed its various aspects at every meeting until we began gradually to think of everything from the point of view of this idea. In his first talk, G gave only a general outline of the idea, and he constantly returned to it himself, pointing out to us its different aspects and meanings. At one of the following meetings he gave us a very interesting picture of another meaning of the law of octaves, which went deeply into things. In order better to understand the significance of the law of octaves, it is necessary to have a clear idea of another property of vibrations, namely the so-called inner vibrations. This means that within vibrations, other vibrations proceed, and that every octave can be resolved into a greater number of inner octaves. Each note of any octave can be regarded as an octave on another plane. Each note of these inner octaves again contains a whole octave, and so on, for some considerable way, but not ad infinitum, because there is a definite limit to the development of inner octaves. Just when you thought it couldn't get more complicated, now there's inner octaves. So as you can see, between this do, there's a whole another octave and another octave, and yeah, but not ad infinitum. These inner vibrations proceed simultaneously in media of different density, interpenetrating one another. They are reflected in one another, give rise to one another, stop, impel, or change one another. Let us imagine vibrations in a substance or a medium of a certain definite density. Let us suppose this substance or medium to consist of the comparatively coarse atoms of world 48, each of which is, so to speak, an agglomeration of 48 primordial atoms. The vibrations which proceed in this medium are divisible into octaves, and the octaves are divisible into notes. Let us imagine that we have taken one octave of these vibrations for the purpose of some kind of investigation. We must realize that within the limits of this octave proceed the vibrations of a still finer substance. The substance of world 48 is saturated with substance of world 24. The vibrations of the substance of world 24 stand in a definite relation to the vibrations in the substance of world 48. Namely, each note of the vibrations in the substance of world 48 contains a whole octave of vibrations in the substance of world 24. These are the inner octaves. The substance of world 24 is, in its turn, permeated with the substance of world 12. In this substance also there are vibrations, and each note of the vibrations of world 24 contains a whole octave of the vibrations of world 12. The substance of world 12 is permeated with the substance of world 6. The substance of world 6 is permeated with the substance of world 3. World 3 is permeated with the substance of world 1. Corresponding vibrations exist in each of these worlds, and the order remains always the same, namely, each note of the vibrations of a coarser substance contains a whole octave of the vibrations of a finer substance. If we begin with vibrations of world 48, we can say that one note of the vibrations in this world contains an octave or 7 notes of the vibrations of the planetary world. Each note of the vibrations of the planetary world contains 7 notes of the vibrations of the world of the sun. Each vibration of the world of the sun will contain 7 notes of the vibrations of the starry world, and so on. The study of inner octaves, the study of their relation to outer octaves, and the possible influence of the former upon the latter constitute a very important part of the study of the world and of man. At the next meeting, G again spoke of the ray of creation, partly repeating and partly supplementing and developing what he had already said. The ray of creation, like every other process which is complete at a given moment, can be regarded as an octave. This would be a descending octave in which Do passes into Si, and Si into La, and so on. The absolute, or all, world 1 will be Do, all worlds, world 3, Si, all suns, world 6, La, our sun, world 12, Sol, all planets, world 24, Fa, the earth, world 48, Mi, the moon, world 96, Re. The ray of creation begins with the absolute. The absolute is all. It is Do. And so you'll see, if you've followed on through all of the chapters, I believe, if I remember rightly, we've found the ray of creation in 2 other sections, in 2 other places. The first time, of course, it was in its most simplest aspect and sense. Then the second time, it had a little bit more nuance and understanding and things related to it. And now we're coming to an even more detailed and complex diagram and description of the ray of creation. And so throughout all of the work of In Search of the Miraculous, things are constantly repeated and expanded upon, and it's only by sort of holding the whole book in mind and having certain particular sections read separately or together. If you want, you can go to the index and read all of the sections about the ray of creation, which I've done in the past. And then to add to that, you have the fourth way, and you can read all of the sections in the fourth way regarding a certain particular aspect of the teaching. But all that to say that, these concepts and ideas have many layers, and we must work our way through the layers, peel back the onion, so to say. The ray of creation ends in the moon. Beyond the moon there is nothing. There also is the absolute dough. In examining the ray of creation or cosmic octave, we see that intervals should come in the development of this octave. The first between Do and Si, that is between world 1 and world 3, between the absolute and all worlds, and the second between Fa and Me, that is between world 24 and world 48, between all planets and the earth. But the first interval is filled by the will of the Absolute. One of the manifestations of the will of the Absolute consists precisely in the filling of this interval by means of a conscious manifestation of neutralizing force which fills up the interval between the active and the passive forces. With the second interval, the situation is more complicated. Something is missing between the planets and the earth. Planetary influences cannot pass to the earth consecutively and fully. An additional shock is indispensable. The creation of some new conditions to ensure a proper passage of forces is indispensable. The conditions to ensure the passage of forces are created by the arrangements of a special mechanical contrivance between the planets and the earth. This mechanical contrivance, this transmitting station of forces, is organic life on Earth. Organic life on Earth was created to fill the interval between the planets and the Earth. Organic life represents, so to speak, the Earth's organ of perception. Organic life forms something like a sensitive film, which covers the whole of the Earth's globe and takes in those influences coming from the planetary sphere, which otherwise would not be able to reach the Earth. The vegetable, animal, and human kingdoms are equally important for the Earth in this respect. A field merely covered with grass takes in planetary influences of a definite kind and transmits them to the Earth. The same field with a crowd of people on it will take in and transmit other influences. The population of Europe takes in one kind of planetary influences and transmits them to the Earth. The population of Africa takes in planetary influences of another kind, and so on. All great events in the life of the human masses are caused by planetary influences. They are the result of the taking in of planetary influences, and any accidental small tension in planetary spheres can be reflected for years in an increased animation in one or another sphere of human activity. Something accidental and very transient takes place in the planetary space. This is immediately received by the human masses, and people begin to hate and to kill one another, justifying their actions by some theory of brotherhood or equality or love or justice. Organic life is the organ of perception of the earth, and it is at the same time an organ of radiation. With the help of organic life, each portion of the earth's surface occupying a given area sends every moment certain kinds of rays in the direction of the sun, the planets, and the moon. In connection with this, the sun needs one kind of radiations, the planets another kind, and the moon another. Everything that happens on Earth creates radiations of this kind, and many things often happen just because certain kinds of radiations are required from a certain place on the Earth's surface. In saying this, G drew our attention in particular to the non-conformity of time, that is, of the duration of events in the planetary world and in human life. The significance of his insistence on this point became clear to me only later. At the same time, he constantly emphasized the fact that no matter what took place in the thin film of organic life, it always served the interests of the earth, the sun, the planets, and the moon. Nothing unnecessary and nothing independent could happen in it because it was created for a definite purpose and was merely subordinate. And once dwelling on this theme, he gave us a diagram of the structure of the octave in which one of the links was given, I'll start again. And once dwelling on this theme, he gave us a diagram of the structure of the octave in which one of the links was organic life on Earth. This additional or lateral octave in the ray of creation begins in the sun, he said. The sun, soul of the cosmic octave, begins at a certain moment to sound as do, sol, do. It is necessary to realize that every note of any octave in the present instance, every note of the cosmic octave, may represent do of some other lateral octave issuing from it. Or it would be still more exact to say that any note of any octave may at the same time be any note of any other octave passing through it. In the present instance, sol begins to sound as do. Descending to the level of the planets, this new octave passes into C. Descending still lower, it produces three notes, la, sol, fa, which create and constitute organic life on Earth in the form that we know it. Me of this octave blends with me of the cosmic octave, that is, the Earth, and the ray with the ray of the cosmic octave, that is, the moon. We at once felt that there was a great deal of meaning in this lateral octave. First of all, it showed that organic life, represented in the diagram by three notes, had two higher notes, one on the level of the planets and one on the level of the sun, and that it began in the sun. This last was the most important point, because once more, as with many other things in G's system, it contradicted the usual modern idea of life having originated, so to speak, from below. In his explanation, life came from above. Then much talk arose about the notes mi, re of the lateral octave. We could not, of course, define what re was, but it was clearly connected with the idea of food for the moon. Some product of the disintegration of organic life went to the moon. This must be re. In regard to me, it was impossible to speak quite definitely. Organic life undoubtedly disappeared in the earth. The role of organic life in the structure of the earth's surface was indisputable. There was the growth of coral islands and limestone mountains, the formation of coal seams and accumulations of petroleum, the acceleration of the soil under the influence of vegetation, the growth of vegetation in lakes, the formation of rich, arable lands by worms, change of climate due to the draining of swamps and the destruction of forests, and many other things that we know of and do not know of. But in addition to this lateral octave, showed with particular clarity how easily and correctly things were classified in the system we were studying. Everything anomalous, unexpected, and accidental disappeared, and an immense and strictly thought-out plan of the universe began to make its appearance. And to conclude, I think I'll read that paragraph again, because it's pretty powerful. But in addition to the lateral octave showed with particular clarity how easily and correctly things were classified in the system we were studying. Everything anomalous, unexpected and accidental disappeared, and an immense and strictly thought-out plan of the universe began to make its appearance. And so that was chapter 7, and if you listen through it in one go, your brain may well be frazzled and fried, and you don't know which way is up or down. But I would say, yeah, I have the PDF if you'd like. If you can't get hold of a physical copy of In Search of the Miraculous, reach out to me by email and I can send over to you a PDF so that you can sort of, if there's a particular concept that interests you, you can sort of read all of the sections about that concept and broaden and deepen your knowledge. And yeah, there's certain bits there, like I say, that will need multiple reviews, multiple studies, maybe even get the old pen and paper out and have another video open explaining musical theory and intervals and those fractions that we saw. And 161157 Gore, you're very welcome. It's quite an unusual name to say out, but thanks for being here and joining me for the reading. A quiet one today, but of course I expected nothing but, because not everyone's interested in this, and I've just come on and just done it in the morning on my day off. But anyone watching on catch up, I hope you enjoyed that. Like I say, slow and steady is the way to study In Search of the Miraculous. Go back and listen to chapters several times, listen to certain sections over and over again to let it seep into the subconscious. Observe yourself, life, the world and the universe, like Gurdjieff explained there. Exploration and knowledge must go on two lines: man and the world, or the universe. And over time we begin to collect these observations, verify certain things that Gurdjieff is saying, and update our view of the world, and hopefully begin to remember ourselves more deeply, more fully, become more conscious, and cease to be a machine and an automaton. But I'll leave it there. I won't go on rambling for another 10 minutes, but what I will say is thanks to those of you who are enjoying and valuing our study of In Search of the Miraculous. It's thanks to you that we're back doing it. Let me know in the comments. Comment chapter 8 if you want chapter 8 to come soon, and I'll get round to that as soon as I have some time. And like I often say, and will repeat again, any questions are welcome in the chat, or if you want to ask something privately, then you're welcome to send an email. Like I say, you'll find that in the About page and even in the description, I think, but in the channel About page, you'll find it. And so, guys, thanks for being here. Thanks for being interested in Gurdjieff and Ouspensky and In Search of the Miraculous. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's not easy. It's not for everyone. But the fact that you're here listening to it makes me very happy. And I'm very excited to continue our study of In Search of the Miraculous. And then likely next we will read Meetings with Remarkable Men, which is Gurdjieff's actual own writing. Whereas this is Ouspensky's detailing of his time with Gurdjieff and the teachings as he received them. For now, farewell. Hey, Kathy, welcome. Before we go, I'm just going to say hi to Kathy for a minute. Hello, Kathy. Yeah, I'm sorry about the time, but we're finishing now, so you can go back and listen to it on repeat and replay. We've just finished chapter 7. Any questions, Kathy, are welcome. I'll be happy to discuss. We have our email thread, and of course you can just comment. But hey, all is well. That's very kind of you. Thanks for supporting. And I've just jumped on to get chapter 7 done because many people were requesting our continuation of In Search of the Miraculous. And so here you are, chapter 7. In the comments, let me know if you want chapter 8 when you're ready for it, and I'll get round to it. But for now, guys, thanks for joining me. Thanks for being interested in the work, the fourth way, for wanting to raise your awareness and consciousness and be a conscious being, someone who can do in the sense that Gurdjieff portrays it. And I'm still rambling. I could ramble forever, but I'll stop. Say goodbye, and I hope to see you tomorrow to continue our study and reading of Life of Pi. And sorry, Kathy, I will, any questions I will answer. I don't think that's not how I've been doing it, commenting on each chapter, but I comment on certain aspects of chapters. So any questions that you have, Kathy, they could well become a video. You know, if you say, speak more about this section, I'll happily do it. And there's sections there about self-remembering at the beginning that I would definitely consider doing a video on. And I just have to find the time to, plan, film, and obviously edit and upload that. But that first 20 minutes, the first 5 or 6 pages is very powerful for self-remembering. So if you want to know more about that, let me know in the comments. Enjoy the reading. And yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing working through this book with you. But that's the last ramble. Goodbye, take care, and I'll see you at the next reading. Take care, guys. See you.